most of the prominent players on this roster, the amount of time that they spend touching the ball has gone down. Mm-hmm. So what type of influence are you seeing from the Spurs coaching staff, and one in which Borrego used to be on his team today?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wrote about it in the article a little bit, the 0.5 mentality of when you catch a ball, you have 0.5 seconds to shoot or pass or drive or just make a decision. Mm-hmm. And so I think you see a lot of that with this team. James Borrego was not only with the Spurs for 10 years under Greg Popovich, but also I believe he was with Monty Williams in New Orleans for a little bit before this tenure in Charlotte. And Monty Williams has the exact same philosophy in Phoenix right now. And, they want to move the ball as much as they possibly can. And they have a lot of really good passers who help them do that. And Phoenix was, I believe, second in assist rate last season. And I'm not positive where they are right now, but I'm pretty sure they're up there. Yeah, they're top 5. I'm looking at it. So yeah, just the philosophy of trying to get everybody involved, trying to make the defense shift from side to side. LaMelo is really good at that. He makes the flashy passes, but he also just works it around the perimeter. And a lot of guys do that. A lot of guys want to see everybody else succeed. They've bought in to that system and that general philosophy. And it's just like a fundamental thing with basketball. When you move the ball, it's harder to guard than just one guy holding it and dribbling and trying to create so much by himself. So even though we haven't really seen a reflection necessarily in, a top 10 offensive rating, I think, some of that is them not making shots, some of the just various different reasons. But like usually when you move the ball around and you have an incredibly high assist rate, good things happen. So hopefully they can keep that up and good things will eventually happen.
At the very least, they're interesting to watch. So to your point, sure, they might not be putting the ball in the basket, but at the very least, they're interesting to watch.
Yeah, I always like with watching the Hornets since JB got to Charlotte, just like there are even just smaller little instances of Spurs influence, and you see them run, wedge pick and roll. I think JB's playbook has perhaps diversified and expanded a decent amount over the last 2 years, but just you see these little bits of the Spursian system that you've seen, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili run. And it was always a bit trippy, even that year one, when you would see Tony Parker run those empty side wedge pick and roll sets, like he was still in San Antonio. But Michael, look, I know it hasn't been a one-man show, but you listed LaMelo Ball in the title of your article for a reason. He's incredibly impressive as a passer, both in full court with those hit-ahead looks and transition. Those are, he beats the cameras often. Catches, I feel like, the production staff off the game in a lot of these live ball moments because they're ready to, cut to someone who's jogging back on defense and they'll miss, LaMelo zinging a laser in the opposite direction. But I think the half court pick and roll playmaking has had some ups and downs, but been pretty good, and generally speaking, pretty good overall. Generally speaking, what have you, based off what you've seen from LaMelo this season, or what you may have even thought about him pre-draft, and given the makeup of Charlotte's roster, its cap sheet, what its books look like, why is he such an ideal fit for this offense and for like the franchise moving forward?
Well, it's really interesting that they got him with the pieces that were already in place. You obviously have Rozier, you have Devontae Graham, who had a breakout year last year, should have been most improved player, in my opinion. And you would think that LaMelo would just kind of start right away as just the starting point guard. They'd put the ball in his hands, they'd give him the keys, they'd let him go. That has not been the case. And I think that's long-term a benefit to him. It's a benefit to the organization. You bring in Gordon Hayward, who is a wing who, passing is Gordon's best suit, is his best quality, in my opinion, and his willingness to kind of use his size and leverage it in ways to make others better, either as a pick and roll playmaker or just someone who's willing to get off of it right away, or someone who can attack a closeout. So I think that the way that LaMelo can help now is what he's doing off the bench and kind of giving a spark a little bit. But I guess long-term, it's going to be really interesting just to see will they constantly have these type of players around LaMelo Ball, meaning guards and other players who are effective with the ball in their hands, or are you going to eventually see a roster that is more, guys who do not need the basketball in their hands, guys who are large wings, who can knock down threes, who can cut a little bit off the ball, who can impact from the weak side, who can rebound, defend, length, etc. It's going to be really interesting. Like, are they going to build? I don't know if LaMelo is the type of player who you want to build around, like the Dallas Mavericks have built their team around Luka Doncic or something like that. Someone who has an extremely high usage. I don't know if that's going to be LaMelo. It's going to be really interesting to see if that's the kind of the philosophical tack that they take going forward.
Yeah, it is like he differs from Luka in this way that, Luka is so big. He's obviously his deceleration skills are amazing in the final third of the court. It makes him just that ideal sort of like wing finisher situation in leverage moments. And, maybe LaMelo gets there at some point, but, right now there's this weird, it's a good problem to have, but it's like, how do you build, how are you going to build a roster around this sort of like heliocentric guard that's going to struggle to finish at the rim? What are the optimal pieces around that? But to that end, in the second unit with LaMelo, we've seen Miles Bridges. Those guys have been basically tethered together so far this season, and they've paired pretty well. There's an obvious chemistry between those two: pick and rolls, slip, transition. Bridges is certainly the best guy on this roster to go up and catch an alley-oop, and maybe we can mention Malik Monk in that, but he's been really on the outskirts of the rotation, and that's probably putting it lightly.
Yeah.
What do you think this means as far as, I guess we sort of talked on this a little bit, but just how important do you think it is to center LaMelo with these types of play finishers? I think ultimately you can't like optimize a roster around this guy until you have at least like one true rim runner in the middle. Miles is like the closest sort of facsimile to that this year, but that's, he's more of like a spot up closeout beater. They're just using him in sort of different ways, and he's skilled, so he can do different stuff. But, what are your general thoughts about the sort of like the optimal player types to put around LaMelo beyond this season?
Yeah, I mean, a 7-footer who can dive, who can protect the rim. That's an interesting piece around him if he's going to be just high volume pick and roll for sure. I like Miles Bridges next to LaMelo Ball. I mean, just an absolute freak athlete, but at the same time, I like PJ Washington. I love the lineups that Charlotte goes to with PJ at the 5. I think that's really smart. And PJ is someone who can, he's not really shooting the 3 ball that well this season, but I think he's, I'm not putting too much stock in his 3-point percentage this year. I think he's long-term a fine enough outside shooter, someone who can post up mismatches. If you run pick and roll with LaMelo and PJ and there's a switch, like PJ is just going to punish whoever is on his backside. So, I mean, I like those two pieces. I think long-term, undersized guys like Devontae are going to be really tricky to just play, especially in like high leverage situations and crunch time against a really good team that can attack you defensively. I think that is maybe a reason why they run more zone right now than anybody in the NBA by a pretty significant margin. I know obviously Cody Zeller being out impacted that as well, but I wonder, when you have an undersized guard like that, just what it does to your defense in a playoff series or again in a crunch time situation. So yeah, I think size matters, shooting matters, athleticism definitely matters. Guys who can get up above the rim, like Bridges. And I mean, one of the great qualities about LaMelo though is that he makes guys around him so much better. He just creates opportunities for like people who are really smart, who know when to cut baseline, like Gordon. He'll find you. And as we saw last night against the Orlando Magic, like some of the passes LaMelo Ball throws are just like, they're just a joy to watch. So like he can make any type of player better, but to thrive, I think athleticism shooting, just like the type of skills that most teams are after right now. Those are pretty helpful for LaMelo.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, he hit Hayward for 2 little cut layups last night. One on the backside of a pick and roll, another with the little.
You go out, or is that just me?
He's frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. See,
It's okay.
Oh crap! I can see. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that, guys.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Finish your thought, Brian, and I'll try to edit it.
I was actually, I don't quite know when it cut out, but as long as I had the parts in there about him hitting Hayward, then I was starting to ramble. So feel free to just move on to the next topic here.
Well, kind of going off script here, Michael, you mentioned zone, and I'm not even going to tailor this question for the Hornets, but just in general, what are your thoughts on the zone defense? Is it something that you think a team should be playing, 20% of their possessions? I mean, it feels like the Hornets are playing a ton of zone, and I don't know if they're doing it out of necessity, which I think it partly is, or if they're just doing it because he thinks that that's the best way to stop the opponents. What is your overall thoughts on a zone defense?
I mean, I think it's matchup dependent. Really, who are you playing? Is the opponent not effective behind the 3-point line? In which case, sure, go zone, make them beat you. There was a game, I want to say it was against the Mavericks, where they were zone heavy early on, and Luka was just waltzing to the rim. And I was like, all right, this is clearly not working. And Borrego called a couple timeouts and was not pleased with the execution. So you can't just go zone and rely on it, especially if guys aren't, one of the things about the Miami Heat when they go zone or win zone last year in particular, you put Andre Iguodala at the top, you put DJJ at the top. That's a lot of length, a lot of an ability to be super disruptive. 30 feet from the basket is huge. And so, I don't know if Charlotte necessarily has the personnel to do the same thing as consistently. They have a top 10 defense, or a defense right outside the top 10 right now, I believe. So the zone, as much as they're doing it, is not killing them. But I think it's a good way to change things up, change up a pace of a game, get an offense that's in rhythm, out of rhythm. If it's your base defense, I think that you'll eventually get carved up, particularly, against some of these, you play the Brooklyn Nets and KD cuts to the nail and just pops open 15 footers all night long, you're screwed. So, you can't do it against everybody for sure. But generally speaking, I think it's been effective for them.
Yeah. I loved in the first game with Kyrie, Harden, and Durant together that Cleveland was I guess that was last Wednesday. They went so heavy on zone. And I thought, to your point of it being a situational thing, a matchup thing, it's like you've got this, it's not even a fully formed roster, and they're trying to incorporate all these new, high usage items together. And I just thought throwing the zone at them was such a great idea. They're hoping they can spread it out and run, 75 pick and rolls. And all of a sudden they got to go up against the zone. It's just a totally different, totally different animal.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. It's a very situational thing. Clearly, no one in the NBA plays more zone than man, but it just feels like the Hornets rely on it a little bit too much. And if you look at some of the uncontested corner 3 shots, they give up a ton. And a lot of it is due to the fact that these teams are getting into the middle, Hornets collapse, and they kick it out for a corner 3. But transitioning back to the offense, the kind of where your piece was focused on, we've definitely seen this new style of offense with the Hornets. And I was hoping that their half-court offense in the numbers were a little bit better this year, just based off of the eye test. I thought they would have been. I mean, they have improved, but it's been, very slight. But where we've seen the biggest improvement, and obviously LaMelo Ball plays a huge role in this, has been in transition, whether that's off steals or whether that's off of, rebounds. He's going to grab it and go. Where do you think he ranks currently in the NBA in terms of or who are some of those players that he ranks up there with in terms of making that home run pass? You got Jokic. Who are the other ones that can make that type of pass?
Yeah, I mean, Jokic at the top of my head. LeBron is just genius at it. James Harden last season in particular was really good. And who else did I want to say here? Oh, Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry is just so good throwing those full length baseball passes. But LaMelo, I mean, The thing is, like, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but I'm writing this article about the Magic right now. And one of the things that Steve Clifford coach teams never do is throw home run passes. Like, they are so protective of the basketball, and they are so all about, preserving your defense. And if you turn it over on a pass like that, obviously when you commit a turnover, you're susceptible and transition the other way. So it's just like really funny to watch, and Clifford was the coach of the Hornets before, to see, like, I wonder if he was still the coach, would LaMelo still have this type of freedom?
Yeah.
It's something funny to think about, but like, to let him go and accentuate his own strengths with passes like that. And I'm sure he feels really confident in their offense and his ability to get those passes off on time and on target. He's great at it. And, those passes are like the most fun to watch, I think, as outside when the camera doesn't catch them, which is a bummer, but
Yeah.
but no, they're great. And he's really effective at them.
Last question on LaMelo here. He's coming off the bench, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier in the podcast. He's only seeing about 25 minutes a night. As far as young pieces, especially the number 3 overall pick, many people are clamoring for this guy to get out on the court. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the Ball family. There's a lot of Ball fans. And when Devontae Graham is struggling, the first thing that you'll see on Twitter is, why isn't LaMelo starting? So what is your take on the situation? And does it make sense to you that Borrego is slowly working him into, to the starting unit, or just giving him a little bit more minutes as the season progresses here? Because I think most people would have assumed number 3 overall pick, you're going to be starting day one.
Yeah, this is kind of a tricky question to answer, just because there's more things that go into it than just on-off numbers. And like, LaMelo's on-off numbers aren't very good. But like, also, to just put someone in the starting lineup who's a rookie over 2 guys who started last year, and Devontae had a really good season, and Terry Rozier has this big contract, and so demoting one of them to the bench, sometimes stuff like that just doesn't sit well in a locker room, and you can lose guys. And so I think it's pretty smart. I think I like how they've played this, even though those 3 together, those 3 guards, when they're on the court, they're really successful in a small sample size. And that's something that maybe they can explore a little bit more going forward. Maybe you put Gordon at the 4. I'm just like a fiend for lineups like that. So yeah. I want to see that. But I don't think there should be any rush necessarily to start LaMelo. I mean, like I said earlier, I don't know how much he impacts winning versus those other guys. And so if you believe that you can make the playoffs, as I think Charlotte should have that belief this early in the season, despite some other plucky teams in the Eastern Conference that they're going to be battling with to try to get into that play-in. Right now, like, you should be trying to win. And it kind of would do a disservice to your organization in the short term if you started LaMelo just for the sake of giving him more minutes. That said, I think I also would like to see him, eventually close more games. He's not really on the floor too much in the fourth quarter, which is really interesting. But again, like, he's a rookie. This is like the first month of his career. There's a lot of time. We don't need to rush through this and put him in a spot that maybe he's not ready for. But yeah, I think, like, generally what we've seen so far is it's good to see.
Yeah, he's just 19 years old. Like, I get that this is like the name of the game or whatever, but the constant discussion on whether he should start or not start, or sort of evaluating his performance on a night-to-night basis, is not, I get it. It's just, like, in general, not super concerning to me.
But it's crazy how heavy that conversation is on Twitter, though, Brian.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's just like, it is, I don't know. It feels a little reductive. I'm all for talking about LaMelo, but I think there are, like, sort of more interesting ways to shape, to discuss LaMelo. But you're right. Like, I get that it's like everyone who follows this team is wondering, if and when it's going to happen. One guy who is definitely a starter for Charlotte is Gordon Hayward. He's been really good this year. We discussed some of this earlier, but just efficient offense, some on-ball creation, 25% usage rate, a 4-level scorer. Look, he's obviously not the athlete he once was back at his pre-injury days in Utah when Quinn Snyder used to design alley-oop lobs for Gordon Hayward. Those days are in the past. But you mentioned you're from Boston. I know you covered him when he was playing for the Celtics. Did you see this level of performance from Gordon Hayward after the last 2 seasons in Boston? Basically, did you just think he needed, a new role and more usage to sort of unlock I guess what I would say is like the best basketball you could imagine him playing, sort of like at the back end of his prime?
I mean, I think right now he's like totally pain free from everything I'm reading. And so that's an obvious factor here. I mean, he had a surgery on his foot, I believe, to kind of repair some nerve issue that he was dealing with all of last season that was unreported. And so if you're feeling great, then you're going to play better. So, his time in Boston was injury riddled. Obviously, when he was healthy, I thought he played at a borderline all-star level, considering that he was on the floor with other very good players who also demanded the ball and demanded a lot of touches. I got to be honest, like I didn't expect him to play this well in Charlotte. But like I said, like he's like you cite the downturn in the athleticism, which is only natural because he's 30 now and he was 26, 25 when he was an all-star in Utah. But like the burst that he had on that go-ahead bucket a couple nights ago against the Magic was like, I had not seen that pretty much throughout his entire tenure with the Celtics.
Yeah.
So like that type of that's a different type of athleticism than just like the airborne, those lobs that you were setting that Quinn Snyder used to drop. But like he's got it and he looks terrific. I don't know if we would have seen this player had he re-signed in Boston because of the context of the roster and what has been asked of him. But it goes to show like situation and role are so important in the NBA. And I'm really happy for Gordon and I'm happy he's playing as well as he is.
Yeah. Situations matter more than I think we can even quite quantify at this point. But Hayward is certainly one example of that. We talked about Devontae Graham a little bit earlier in this podcast. Been better as of late this season. He's still launching threes, albeit more of those looks are coming from off the catch this season, but he's shooting those at in the high 30s, which is you like to see. Continues to struggle from the mid-range, continues to struggle at the rim. I thought he left some sort of meat on the bone in the last 2 games against Orlando, playing against a lot of minutes against a deep drop in Vucevic. I think there were some concerns about, what adding Melo could do to Graham after he had such a great season during his sophomore year in the league. However, there was also some optimism that adding a guy like LaMelo could sort of stabilize things for DG, which we referenced the catch and shoot numbers. I think we've seen that in some ways, but looking over the course of the season, just thoughts on Devontae as he's in his final year of his rookie contract, working long-term or short-term or intermediate-term partnership with LaMelo, and maybe sort of like ultimately what kind of role does Devontae Graham sort of, speak out to you where he eventually settles as a full-time NBA player?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, Devontae Graham obviously came out of nowhere, at least for me personally, last season. I thought
that's for everyone, Michael, not just you.
Yeah.
I thought he should have been most improved player, as I said earlier. I get what you're saying, Brian, with he maybe should have attacked the deep drop a little bit more against Vooch, and that shot is there for him. I think obviously the shooting slump to start this season was really, really bad. He has he's impaired because of his size, and I think the issues really spread to the defensive end. And I just go back to how, like, what is valued when you want to win at a high level in the NBA and what the threshold is for offensive production if you are that small. Like, I honestly think that you need to be as good or better than Kemba Walker was last season You need to be like, if you want to be that small and play big minutes on a very good team, you need to be just like A+ elite offensively. Like, bringing up guys like Steph or Dame. Like, I don't think Devontae's ever going to get to that level, but
probably not.
there is, I think, a place for him for sure in the league, though, given that he can pull up off the bounce and stretch defenses that way. I don't know if that's going to be 34 minutes a night on a playoff team or a really good team that can have home court in the playoffs or anything like that. But, off the bench, he could be like a 6th man of the year candidate, honestly. So I don't know where that's going to be, where that's going to take place. Maybe it's in Charlotte, maybe it's elsewhere. But I'm a big fan of his game in general. I'm a big fan of him. And it's good to see him kind of bounce back a little bit from the struggles from earlier this season.
Yeah, or those LaMelo fans would be clamoring even more. But I've always said that he's got to find a way to develop something inside the 3-point line, whether that's the floater or the mid range. I don't ever think he's going to be that great at the rim just because of his size, but he's got to get something down inside the 3-point line. So last question here before we let you go. Charlotte is currently 12th in the East. I guess if you want to get technical, they are tied for 10th. At a record of 7-10 here. But when it's all said and done, if you had to put money on it, where do you think Charlotte finishes this season in the East? Will they be a play-in team?
Great question.
Yeah. On the cusp there.
It's really interesting because, you say they're 12th, but what are they, like half a game back of the 8th seed, I think right now?
Yeah.
It's like, it is a jumbled mess. We talked about Orlando. The Knicks are like out of nowhere. I don't know if that's sustainable. The Raptors and the Heat, teams that are really good, were really good last year. Yeah. They're right around either the same record or even a worse record than Charlotte right now. So like, you think that they'll come along and make a little bit of a push. You think that Cleveland might drop off? That's like your hope, the team that is currently in the playoff frame. But it's really, really, really crowded. So it's tough to pick any of those teams and be like, yeah, I'm confident that they will either make the playoffs or even compete in the play-in game. When I look at the East right now, the only 2 teams that I'm just like, I'm completely writing off are the Detroit Pistons and the Washington Wizards. So that's 13 teams for 8 spots. Like it's going to be tough. I think they'll need definitely to up their, first of all, you need health for sure. And you need to that other teams don't have the same type of luck that you do on the injury front. And your offense just has to be better than it's been. You have to hit more shots. I know that sounds really dumb, but that's kind of what it is right now, because their effective field goal percentage is not where you would like it to be if you're a playoff team, given that they don't have an elite defense. So, hitting shots is a great start. And I don't know. I think they'll be in it, though. They'll be in the conversation for a long while because of just the style that they play. And I think they're really well coached, and I think they have a lot of really talented pieces. But there's other really good teams out there, or teams that have